There is an uncomfortable truth about human nature that many people prefer not to face. Not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well. Not everyone who sits beside you supports you. And sometimes the person who appears the kindest is the very person quietly destroying your peace. Think about it. You may spend months, sometimes even years, trusting someone, sharing stories, opening your heart, believing they care about you, only to eventually realize they were the source of your suffering all along. Some people do not simply make mistakes. Some people enjoy chaos. They enjoy control, and in darker cases, they enjoy the power they feel when others suffer. This is why understanding human character is one of the most important skills you can develop. The Stoic philosophers understood this deeply. They believed that peace in life does not come from controlling the world, but from seeing the world clearly. As the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius once reflected, we must learn to observe people carefully, not just by their words, but by their actions, their patterns, and their intentions. Because the truth is this: evil rarely introduces itself openly. It hides, sometimes behind charm, sometimes behind sympathy, sometimes behind friendship, or even love. And if you are not attentive, you may allow such people into your life, where they slowly erode your confidence, your happiness, and your sense of self. Today we are going to uncover 5 powerful signs that reveal when you may be dealing with a deeply toxic or destructive person. These signs are not always obvious at first. In fact, many dangerous personalities are masters of deception. They know how to appear kind, how to appear helpful, how to appear trustworthy. But over time, their true nature always begins to reveal itself. By the end of this video, you will not only be able to recognize these behaviors more clearly, but you will also understand how Stoic wisdom can help you protect your peace, your mind, and your integrity. And make sure you stay until the end, because in the final part of this video, we will discuss a powerful Stoic strategy for setting boundaries with toxic people, a skill that can completely transform the way you protect your life from manipulation and emotional damage. So take a deep breath, and let us begin with the first sign. Sign number 1, the mask of charm. One of the most deceptive traits of dangerous people is how pleasant they can appear in the beginning. In fact, many manipulative or toxic individuals are often incredibly charming. They know how to talk. They know how to make others laugh. And most importantly, they know how to make you feel special. When you first meet them, it almost feels like an instant connection. They listen carefully to what you say. They show interest in your life. They compliment you. They make you feel seen, appreciated, even admired. In social settings, they often become the center of attention. People are drawn to their energy, their humor, their confidence. It may even feel exciting to be around them. You might think, this person is amazing. But the Stoics warned us about something important. First impressions are often illusions. Epictetus taught that we should never judge someone too quickly, based on how they present themselves in the moment. Because character is not revealed in a single conversation. Character is revealed over time, and when you begin to observe more closely, the mask of charm often begins to crack. You might notice something subtle at first. They interrupt people frequently. They dominate conversations. They redirect attention back to themselves whenever someone else begins to speak. At first it may seem harmless. Maybe they are just confident. Maybe they are just outgoing. But slowly, a pattern begins to appear. When someone else shares a success, they quickly shift the conversation back to themselves. When someone expresses an opinion, they dismiss it. When someone else is receiving attention, they find a way to reclaim the spotlight. This is not confidence. This is ego disguised as charm. And the Stoics believed that people who constantly crave attention often lack inner stability. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that a truly virtuous person does not seek admiration from the crowd. They simply live according to reason and integrity. But someone wearing a mask of charm is often seeking something very different. They are seeking control over perception. Imagine being at a gathering where this person is entertaining everyone around them. They tell jokes, they tell stories, everyone laughs. At first, it feels enjoyable to be near them. But as the evening continues, something starts to feel strange. Every conversation revolves around them. Every story becomes about their achievements. And whenever someone else begins speaking about their own experiences, they quickly interrupt or redirect the conversation. It becomes clear that their charm is not about connection. It is about attention. Another revealing moment comes when things do not go their way. A person of genuine character handles disagreement calmly. They listen. They reflect. They remain composed. But someone hiding behind charm often reacts very differently. If they feel criticized, even slightly, their tone changes. They may become defensive. They may become angry. Or they may attempt to subtly humiliate the person who challenged them. This sudden shift reveals something important. Their kindness was never genuine. It was conditional. It existed only as long as it served their image. The Stoics believed that emotional balance, what they called apatheia, helps us see through these illusions. When we remain calm and observant, we begin to notice patterns others miss. We notice how someone behaves when they are not the center of attention. We notice how they treat people who cannot benefit them. We notice how they react when their ego is challenged. And slowly, the truth begins to appear, because genuine kindness is consistent. But charm used for manipulation is temporary. And once the mask begins to slip, you may realize the person you admired at first was never the person they pretended to be. Sign number 2, the absence of empathy. Another powerful warning sign that you may be dealing with a deeply toxic or destructive person is something far more subtle, yet far more dangerous: a lack of empathy. Empathy is one of the most essential qualities that binds human beings together. It is the ability to understand another person's pain, to feel concern when someone suffers, to share in the happiness and struggles of those around us. Empathy is what allows friendships to deepen. It is what strengthens families. And it is what allows societies to function with compassion and cooperation. Without empathy, relationships become empty. They become transactional. And in the darkest cases, they become harmful. The Stoic philosophers believed strongly in the idea that human beings are naturally connected to one another. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that we are made to live and work together, just like the hands and the feet of the same body. This is why compassion, understanding, and fairness were considered fundamental virtues in Stoic philosophy. But when you encounter someone who seems completely indifferent to the feelings of others, That is a serious warning sign, because a person who cannot feel empathy often has very little internal resistance against hurting others. Imagine opening up to someone about something deeply personal. Perhaps you share a struggle you are going through, a moment of vulnerability, or a painful experience from your life. In a healthy relationship, the other person listens. They acknowledge your feelings. They offer support even if they cannot solve your problem. But a person who lacks empathy reacts very differently. They may dismiss your emotions entirely. They might change the subject quickly, showing little interest in what you are experiencing. In some cases, they may even mock your vulnerability. They may say things like, "You're overreacting. It's not that serious." Other people have it much worse. These responses may seem small in the moment, but over time they create a painful pattern. You begin to feel misunderstood. You begin to feel emotionally unsupported. And slowly you stop sharing parts of yourself with them, because deep down you realize something important. They simply do not care. But the absence of empathy is not only visible during moments of pain, it also appears during moments of joy. When something good happens in your life, a promotion, a personal achievement, or even a small victory, a person with empathy celebrates with you. They feel happy for your success. But someone who lacks empathy may respond in a very different way. Instead of celebrating you, they may downplay your accomplishment. They may shift the conversation back to themselves. Or worse, they may try to undermine what you achieved. Sometimes they even take credit for your success, or subtly suggest that your achievement was not that impressive. This behavior reveals something deeply unsettling. They are not emotionally connected to your happiness. They are only concerned with their own. This lack of empathy can also appear in professional environments. Consider a boss who constantly pushes employees to exhaustion. They demand long hours. They ignore requests for rest or balance. And when someone struggles under pressure, they respond with criticism rather than support. To them, people are not human beings with emotions and limits. They are simply tools to achieve results. This kind of leadership creates toxic environments filled with stress, resentment, and burnout. The Stoics believed that true strength is not found in domination or cruelty. It is found in justice and fairness. The philosopher Seneca wrote extensively about kindness, reminding us that power without compassion is a sign of weakness, not strength. And yet, individuals who lack empathy often go even further, because when someone cannot emotionally connect with the suffering of others, it becomes much easier for them to justify harmful actions. They may lie. They may betray trust. They may manipulate people, and in extreme cases, they may cause serious emotional or psychological damage without feeling any guilt or remorse. But the absence of empathy is not always obvious at first. Often it reveals itself through smaller, everyday behaviors. You might notice that someone constantly interrupts others during conversations. They rarely ask meaningful questions about anyone else's life. They show little interest in listening. And when someone clearly needs help, they simply look away. At first, these may seem like minor personality flaws. But when these behaviors appear consistently, they begin to form a clear pattern, a pattern that reveals a deeper truth about someone's character. The Stoics encouraged us to observe people carefully, not to judge them harshly, but to understand their nature. Because when you recognize patterns early, you can protect yourself from future harm. If you find yourself dealing with someone who consistently lacks empathy, it becomes essential to protect your emotional well-being. You must recognize that their inability to care is not your responsibility. It is not something you can fix, and it is not something you should tolerate indefinitely. The Stoics believed strongly in maintaining inner peace. They taught that while we cannot control the actions of others, we can control the distance we allow them to have in our lives. Sometimes the wisest choice is not confrontation. Sometimes the wisest choice is simply creating space, because a person who cannot feel empathy will rarely change for your sake. And the more energy you invest in trying to make them understand your feelings, the more exhausted you will become. Protecting your peace means recognizing when someone is emotionally incapable of offering the respect and compassion that healthy relationships require. And once you see that clearly, you can step back without guilt. But empathy is not the only trait that dangerous people lack. In many cases, they also possess a far more calculated ability. An ability that allows them to twist reality itself. And this leads us to the third sign. Sign number 3. Manipulation. Perhaps one of the most dangerous traits an evil person can possess is manipulation. Unlike anger or cruelty, manipulation does not always reveal itself immediately. It works quietly, slowly, often so subtly that you may not even realize what is happening until the damage is already done. Manipulation is the art of controlling others without appearing to do so. A manipulative person does not force you directly. Instead, they influence your thoughts, your emotions, and your decisions, until you begin acting in ways that benefit them. And the most troubling part is this. Many victims of manipulation believe the decisions they are making are their own. The Stoic philosophers placed enormous importance on clarity of perception. They believed that one of the greatest dangers in life is allowing our understanding of reality to become distorted, because once our perception becomes clouded, our judgment begins to fail. And this is exactly what manipulators tried to achieve. They attempt to distort your perception of reality. They twist situations, they reshape conversations, and slowly they begin to influence how you see yourself and the world around you. One of the most common forms of manipulation is something known as gaslighting. Gaslighting occurs when someone deliberately makes you doubt your own memory, judgment, or perception. Imagine confronting someone about something hurtful they said. You clearly remember the moment. You remember how it made you feel. But instead of acknowledging it, they respond with complete denial. They might say, "That never happened. You're imagining things. You always misunderstand everything." At first, you may question their response. But if this behavior continues repeatedly, something dangerous begins to happen. You start doubting your own mind. You begin wondering if perhaps you did misinterpret the situation. Your confidence in your own perception slowly weakens. And once that confidence is damaged, the manipulator gains control. Because if you no longer trust your own judgment, you begin relying on their version of reality instead. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus warned about this very danger. He taught that our freedom depends on maintaining control over our own judgments. Once someone else begins controlling how we interpret events, our inner freedom begins to disappear. But manipulation does not stop with gaslighting. Another powerful tactic manipulators use is playing the victim. Instead of taking responsibility for their behavior, they reverse the roles. Suddenly, they are the one who has been wronged. They may say things like, "If you really cared about me, you would do this. You're abandoning me when I need you. You're the reason I feel this way." These words are carefully chosen. They are designed to trigger guilt, to make you feel responsible for their emotions. And once guilt enters the situation, it becomes much easier for them to control your behavior. You may find yourself doing things you do not want to do, simply to avoid feeling like a bad person. But the Stoics taught something incredibly important. You are not responsible for another person's emotions. You are responsible only for your own actions and your own character. Another manipulative tactic appears in the form of strategic praise. At first, a manipulative person may shower you with compliments. They may admire your intelligence, your kindness, your talents. It feels wonderful. It feels validating. But slowly you begin to notice something strange. Their praise appears only when they want something. They compliment you right before asking for a favor. They admire you when they need your help. And when you refuse, the warmth suddenly disappears. The approval becomes coldness. The admiration becomes criticism. This emotional fluctuation is not accidental. It is a calculated strategy designed to make you seek their approval. And once someone becomes dependent on approval, they become easier to control. The Stoics warned us about this trap. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself repeatedly that self-worth should never depend on the opinions of others. Because once you begin living for approval, you surrender your independence. Manipulation can also take a much darker form: isolation. A manipulative person may begin criticizing the people in your life. They might say your friends do not truly care about you. They might claim your family misunderstands you. They might suggest that others are jealous of you or secretly against you. At first, these comments may seem harmless, but over time, they slowly erode your trust in the people around you. Eventually, you may begin distancing yourself from friends and family without even realizing it. And once that happens, something very dangerous occurs. Your support system disappears. You become emotionally dependent on the very person manipulating you. This makes it far easier for them to influence your choices, your beliefs, and your life. The Stoics believed strongly in the importance of community. They understood that human beings thrive when surrounded by supportive, rational people. Isolation weakens our perspective. It makes us vulnerable, and manipulators know this. Sometimes manipulation even extends into financial control. Someone may borrow money repeatedly without any intention of repaying it. Or they may attempt to control your financial decisions entirely. In relationships, this can become especially dangerous. A partner might insist on managing all finances. They might restrict your access to money. They might force you to ask permission for basic expenses. What appears to be responsibility slowly becomes control. And once financial independence disappears, leaving the situation becomes much more difficult. The Stoics believed strongly in self-sufficiency. They encouraged individuals to maintain independence in both thought and resources, so that they could not be easily dominated by others. Recognizing manipulation can be extremely difficult, especially when you care about the person involved. But Stoic philosophy encourages us to step back and observe situations with calm rationality. Ask yourself, do they frequently twist situations in their favor? Do they make you feel guilty for setting boundaries? Do they make you question your own judgment? Do you often feel confused after conversations with them? If the answer to these questions is yes, there is a strong possibility that manipulation is occurring. And when that realization happens, the Stoics advise us to respond not with anger, but with clarity and strength. You cannot control another person's behavior, but you can control how much influence they have over your life. By strengthening your awareness and trusting your own judgment, you remove the very power manipulators depend on. And once that power disappears, their control begins to collapse. But manipulation is not the only way toxic individuals attempt to dominate others. Some take it one step further. They do not merely influence your decisions. They attempt to control your entire life. And this brings us to the fourth sign. Sign number 4. Controlling behavior. While manipulation works quietly behind the scenes, controlling behavior is far more visible. It is the moment when someone begins trying to dominate your choices, your freedom, and your independence. At first, it may not look like control at all. In fact, it often disguises itself as something positive: concern, care, protection. A controlling person rarely says directly, "I want to control you." Instead, they frame their behavior as if they are simply trying to help. They may say things like, "I'm only doing this because I care about you. I know what's best for you. You'll thank me later." At first, these words can sound comforting. It may even feel like someone is looking out for you. But over time, something begins to feel wrong. Your choices slowly begin to shrink. Your independence begins to disappear. And before you realize it, many of the decisions in your life are no longer truly yours. The Stoic philosophers valued personal autonomy deeply. They believed that the greatest form of freedom was not political power or wealth, but the ability to govern one's own mind and life. The philosopher Epictetus often spoke about the importance of protecting our inner freedom, because once another person begins dictating our actions, our choices, and our identity, we are no longer living according to reason. We are living under control. Controlling behavior often begins with small things. Perhaps you have a friend who always insists on choosing where you go when you spend time together. They decide the restaurant. They decide the activity. They decide the schedule. At first it may seem harmless. Maybe they are simply more decisive. Maybe they just enjoy planning. But over time you begin noticing a pattern. Whenever you express a different opinion, it is dismissed. Whenever you suggest an alternative, it is ignored. Slowly, the relationship stops feeling balanced. Instead of mutual decisions, it becomes one person consistently imposing their will. In romantic relationships, controlling behavior can become even more intense. A controlling partner may begin monitoring your daily activities. They might ask where you are at all times, who you are with, what you are doing. At first, it may appear as curiosity or affection, but eventually it turns into something far more oppressive. They demand constant updates. They question your movements. They grow suspicious whenever you spend time with others. Some even go as far as checking phones, reading messages, or demanding access to personal accounts. This level of surveillance creates an atmosphere of anxiety. You begin feeling like you must constantly justify your actions. You start walking carefully, trying to avoid triggering their anger or suspicion. The Stoics would recognize this immediately as a threat to inner freedom, because when fear begins shaping your behavior, your autonomy has already been compromised. Control can also appear through financial domination. In certain relationships, one person begins taking full control of money and financial decisions. They may insist that they handle all the finances because they are better at it. They might limit your access to funds. They might require you to ask permission before spending anything. At first, it may seem efficient or practical, But over time, financial control can create dependence, and dependence creates vulnerability. When someone controls your financial resources, they gain enormous influence over your life. Leaving the situation becomes far more difficult. The Stoics believed that independence, both mentally and materially, was essential for a life of dignity. A person who seeks to control another's financial freedom is often seeking power rather than partnership. Another dangerous form of control is social isolation. A controlling individual may slowly begin turning you against the people closest to you. They may criticize your friends. They may question your family's intentions. They might say things like, "Your friends don't really care about you. Your family doesn't understand you like I do. They're just jealous of you." These words slowly plant seeds of doubt. Over time, you may begin distancing yourself from people who once supported you. Eventually, you find yourself relying almost entirely on the controlling individual. And that is exactly what they want. Because once your support system disappears, their control becomes far stronger. The Stoics believed that strong relationships and community are essential to human well-being. Isolation weakens our perspective. It traps us inside the influence of one person's narrative. And controlling individuals often exploit this. In more extreme situations, control may escalate into intimidation or threats. Someone might threaten to leave the relationship if you do not obey their wishes. They might threaten to harm themselves. In some cases, they may even threaten to harm you. These threats create an environment of fear, and fear makes it difficult to think clearly. When people feel afraid, they often make decisions simply to avoid conflict, even when those decisions go against their own values. The Stoic philosopher Seneca spoke often about courage. He believed that true strength lies in refusing to surrender one's principles out of fear, because once fear begins dictating our actions, we lose control of our own lives. It is important to understand something very clearly. Controlling behavior is not about love. It is not about care. It is about power. It is about one person attempting to dominate another person's freedom. The Stoics would advise us to recognize such behavior quickly, not with hatred, but with clarity. Because the longer control continues, the harder it becomes to break free. If you find yourself dealing with someone who constantly tries to dictate your choices, your relationships, or your independence, it is essential to set firm boundaries. You must remind yourself that your life belongs to you. Your choices belong to you, and no one has the right to control your freedom. But controlling behavior is not the final sign of a deeply toxic or destructive personality. There is one final trait that often reveals the true nature of such individuals, a behavior that slowly destroys trust and corrupts every relationship it touches. And that final sign is something far more deceptive: constant pathological lying, which brings us to the fifth and final sign. Sign number 5, pathological lying. Perhaps the most disturbing sign that you may be dealing with a deeply toxic or destructive person is constant habitual lying, not the small occasional lies that most people are sometimes guilty of, but something far more serious, a pattern of deception so consistent that truth itself becomes difficult to recognize. This is what psychologists often describe as pathological lying. A pathological liar does not lie only when necessary. They lie constantly. They distort facts. They invent stories. They manipulate details. Sometimes the lies are meant to gain advantage. Other times, They seem completely unnecessary. But over time, these lies create something extremely dangerous, a false reality. The Stoic philosophers placed enormous importance on truth. For them, living a virtuous life meant living in alignment with reality. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius often wrote about the importance of honesty, not only with others, but with ourselves. Because once truth disappears, reason disappears with it. And when reason disappears, chaos begins. A person who lies habitually creates confusion everywhere they go. At first, the lies may appear small. They might exaggerate stories to make themselves seem more impressive. They might claim achievements they never actually accomplished. They might twist details of events to present themselves in a better light. These small lies may seem harmless in the beginning, but slowly the pattern becomes more serious. They begin lying to avoid responsibility. They lie to cover mistakes. They lie to manipulate how others perceive them. And sometimes they lie simply because deception has become a habit. Over time, something unsettling begins to happen. You start questioning everything they say. You begin wondering which parts of their stories are true and which parts are fabricated. Trust begins to dissolve. And once trust disappears, relationships become extremely unstable. Consider how a pathological liar might operate in a workplace. They might exaggerate their qualifications. They might take credit for work that others completed. They might spread false rumors about colleagues to sabotage them. Eventually, the environment becomes toxic. People stop trusting each other. Confusion replaces cooperation, and the entire structure of the workplace begins to weaken. The Stoics believed that integrity is the foundation of all meaningful relationships. Without honesty, cooperation becomes impossible. Without truth, trust cannot exist. But pathological lying becomes even more destructive in personal relationships. Imagine sharing your life with someone who constantly distorts reality. They lie about where they have been. They lie about conversations. They lie about promises they made. You confront them with evidence, yet they continue denying it. Sometimes they even turn the situation around, making you feel as though you are the one misunderstanding things. Over time, this creates deep psychological confusion. You begin questioning your memory. You begin doubting your instincts. You may even begin feeling anxious whenever you try to understand what is really happening. This confusion is not accidental. For many pathological liars, confusion becomes a tool of control. When someone cannot clearly separate truth from lies, they become easier to manipulate. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus warned about the importance of maintaining clarity in our perceptions. He believed that once someone begins distorting reality around us, we must remain vigilant. We must rely on reason rather than emotional attachment. Because emotional attachment can sometimes blind us to patterns we do not want to see. Another revealing moment occurs when a pathological liar is caught. A person of strong character may feel embarrassed when they are exposed. They may admit their mistake. They may attempt to repair the damage. But a habitual liar often reacts very differently. They become defensive, they become aggressive, or they quickly create another lie to cover the previous one. Instead of correcting the deception, they expand it. They weave increasingly complex stories to maintain their illusion. Eventually, their life becomes a tangled web of contradictions, and everyone around them begins feeling the consequences. The Stoics believed that truth brings peace of mind, because when you live honestly, There is nothing to hide. There is no constant effort required to maintain a false image. But a person who lives through deception must constantly manage their lies. They must remember which story they told to whom. They must continually manipulate situations to prevent their lies from being exposed. This creates internal instability and external chaos. And perhaps the most tragic part is this. Once trust is broken repeatedly, it becomes incredibly difficult to restore. Even if the liar eventually tells the truth, the damage may already be permanent. You may find yourself constantly questioning their words, always wondering if another deception is hiding beneath the surface. The Stoics taught that relationships should be built upon mutual respect, honesty, and integrity. When these foundations are destroyed, maintaining the relationship may no longer be healthy. Sometimes the wisest decision is not to continue repairing broken trust endlessly, but to step away from those who repeatedly violate it. If you discover that someone in your life lies constantly, twisting facts, manipulating stories, and creating confusion, it becomes essential to protect your mental and emotional stability. The Stoics would remind us that while we cannot control the actions of others, we can choose who we allow into our lives. Your peace of mind is not something that should be sacrificed for someone else's deception. Because once honesty disappears, genuine connection disappears as well. And without honesty, no relationship can truly survive. But recognizing these 5 signs is only the first step. The real question is this: what should you do when you encounter people like this? How can you protect your peace without becoming bitter or hostile yourself? The Stoic philosophers offered a powerful answer to this problem, a principle that allows you to remain calm, strong, and emotionally protected, no matter what kind of person you are dealing with. And that principle is learning to set clear boundaries. Which brings us to the final and most important part of this discussion. Bonus section: the Stoic art of setting boundaries. Recognizing toxic behavior is important, but recognition alone is not enough. Because once you understand that someone in your life is manipulative, controlling, dishonest, or emotionally harmful, the real challenge begins. How do you protect yourself? How do you maintain your peace without allowing their behavior to damage your mind, your confidence, or your life? This is where one of the most powerful Stoic practices becomes essential: setting boundaries. A boundary is simply a clear line that defines what you will and will not accept in your life. It is a declaration of self-respect. It is not about controlling others. It is about protecting your own peace and integrity. The Stoics believed deeply in the importance of maintaining inner stability. They understood that while we cannot control the behavior of other people, we can absolutely control how much influence they have over our lives. And boundaries are the tool that allows us to do exactly that. The first step in setting boundaries is clarity. You must become honest with yourself about what behaviors you will no longer tolerate. If someone constantly insults you, belittles you, or disrespects you, that behavior cannot be ignored forever. If someone manipulates you emotionally, that must be acknowledged. If someone lies repeatedly or attempts to control your freedom, that must be confronted. The Stoics valued honesty above comfort. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, but ignoring reality only prolongs suffering. Once you have clarity, the next step is communication. A boundary that is never expressed cannot be respected. You must communicate your limits calmly and directly. For example, If someone frequently speaks to you in a disrespectful way, you might say, "I value our relationship, but I will not accept being spoken to with disrespect. If this continues, I will need to distance myself." Notice something important here. This statement is not aggressive. It is not insulting. It is simply clear. The Stoics believe that calm, rational communication preserves dignity while establishing strength. But communication alone is not enough. The most difficult part of boundaries is consistency. Many people express boundaries once, but fail to enforce them. When someone crosses the line again, they excuse the behavior. They tolerate it. They hope it will change. But toxic individuals often test limits repeatedly. They watch carefully to see whether your words carry real consequences. And if they realize your boundaries are flexible, they will continue crossing them. This is why consistency is essential. If someone repeatedly ignores your limits, you must follow through with the consequences you established. Sometimes that means reducing contact. Sometimes it means distancing yourself emotionally. And in some cases, it may even mean ending the relationship entirely. The Stoic philosopher Seneca often spoke about the importance of choosing our company wisely. He believed that the people we surround ourselves with have enormous influence over our character and our peace of mind. If someone consistently violates your boundaries, they are showing you something important. They do not respect you. And without respect, no relationship can remain healthy. Another challenge that often appears when setting boundaries is resistance. People who are used to controlling others rarely welcome change. When you begin asserting yourself, they may react with anger. They may attempt to guilt you. They may accuse you of being selfish or unfair. But this reaction is not a sign that your boundaries are wrong. In fact, it often confirms that your boundaries are necessary. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that we must remain calm when facing the negative reactions of others, because people often resist anything that threatens their control or comfort. Your responsibility is not to please everyone. Your responsibility is to live according to your principles. Sometimes boundaries also require difficult decisions. You may need to distance yourself from someone you once trusted. You may need to limit contact with a friend, a colleague, or even a family member. This can be painful, but the Stoics believed that preserving one's inner peace is a responsibility, not a luxury. You cannot build a peaceful life while constantly surrounded by chaos. Another powerful support system when establishing boundaries is community. Speak with trusted friends. Seek advice from people who value honesty and integrity. Share your experiences with those who understand your situation. The Stoics valued friendship deeply. They believed that wise companions help strengthen our character and support us during difficult decisions. You do not have to face toxic situations alone. Finally, one of the most important elements of boundary setting is self-care. When dealing with difficult people, emotional exhaustion can accumulate quietly. You must make time to restore your energy. Spend time doing things that bring you peace. Strengthen your physical and mental health. Protect your mind from constant negativity. The Stoics believed that caring for yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Because when your mind is calm and your body is strong, you are far better equipped to face the challenges of life. In the end, setting boundaries is not about pushing people away. It is about protecting what matters most: your peace, your dignity, your integrity. The Stoics taught that our worth is not determined by how much we tolerate from others. Our worth is determined by the principles we choose to live by. And when you set clear boundaries, you send a powerful message, not only to others, but to yourself. You affirm that your peace of mind is valuable. You affirm that your life deserves respect. And you affirm that no one has the right to manipulate, control, or diminish who you are. Recognizing toxic behavior requires awareness. Responding to it requires courage. But protecting your peace is one of the most powerful forms of wisdom you can practice. Thank you for joining me today. If this video helped you see human behavior more clearly, consider exploring more Stoic teachings that can strengthen your mind and your life. Stay aware, stay disciplined, and above all, stay true to your principles.